advisory group, and one of the members of that group is our speaker today, Josh Itzoe. So I'm honored to introduce Josh. We have a few things in common. We're both Calvert Hall guys. He played a more challenging sport than me, baseball. I played football, lacrosse. But Josh went on to not only have a great career at Calvert Hall, but Georgia Tech, right?
Wake Forest.
Wake Forest, I got it, okay. Great career at Wake Forest, 5 years as a professional in the minors. He may share some of that. Comes out, gets involved in business, grows an incredibly successful business in the 401k retirement planning space, ends up writing a best-selling book, an industry-wide, highly regarded book, has great success, ends up selling his company, and I know he's going to share some of that story with us today. Incredible wife, 4 beautiful children. I know at least one's a Calvert Hall golfer, I think, yes. And a good one at that, I'm sure. And but Josh has got a humble, God-honoring, real story that I know we're going to all be blessed to hear today. So let's welcome Josh.
Thanks, Frank. Good to be with everybody. Little caveat, when you write a book about 401k plans, like if a handful of people read it, it's technically considered a bestseller. I don't want to overstate, nobody ever confused me of being Ernest Hemingway. Yeah, so it's my privilege to kind of share with you today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey with the company that I co-founded with one of my best friends back in 2004. Some of the lessons that we learned over the years, some of the things we got right, some of the failures that we had as well, and with a real focus on how we approached our people and building our culture, because that was one of the kind of the secrets. We made mistakes, I'll share some of those, but we got some things right that really kind of infused, I think, the success of our company over the years. And then it's not all unicorns and rainbows. So at the end of that, I'll tell you about some of the failings, the personal failings that I had that ultimately led me to walk away from my firm and what I had built. Through that period, which there were some trials and tribulations, to say the least, and I'll be very transparent about that. And then a little bit about kind of the redemption story that the Lord has kind of brought out of that. As Frank had mentioned, my dad worked for the Orioles for 45 years in the front office, so I grew up around the game of baseball and played at Calvert Hall in Wake Forest, and had people asked me what position I played in the minor leagues, and I said, well, I played a little bit of left field, I played a little bit of right field, I played mostly left out, and that's why I didn't get to the big leagues. And so pivoted. I had gotten a job. I had met a guy through my church who was the CEO of a small software company. This was in the later half of the 1990s. He gave me a job. I worked there for a couple of years, but I really wanted to own my own business. And I had been leading, some of you may know Mike Donahue from Search Ministries, who was, I've been so fortunate to have a really strong group of mentors in my life over the years. Some of them are in this room, actually. And he got me leading this, encouraged me to lead like a little house church. So in my mid-20s, I was leading this house church at my house every week for other people that were my age. Mike Donahue was kind of mentoring me in that. And he was leading a small group at Baltimore Country Club for some of the professionals of Baltimore Country Club. And he wanted to close that group down. He said, hey, I have a couple that is your age that I'd like to come to your house church. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And they came, and it wound up becoming, one of my very closest and best friends. His name's Pat Collins. He worked at Merrill Lynch, and he's like, you should get in the advisory business. You'd be really good at it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I think it's interesting. So I went to work for Morgan Stanley, and I worked there for only about 18 months because he and I actually put together a business plan in 2002 about starting our own independent financial advisory firm. And so, he was at Merrill Lynch, I was at Morgan Stanley. He was there for maybe 3.5 or 4 years. I was there for maybe 2 years. And in 2004, we left. We were in our late 20s. We left to start our own firm that was called Greenspring Advisors. It was called Greenspring Wealth Management. First, we changed the name a couple of years later. Found out the day before I resigned from Morgan Stanley that my wife was pregnant with our first child. So if you want some, some fuel to go out and hustle, I was like, you do know that I'm getting ready to leave and not make any money for a while. So we started this firm, bootstrapped it. I didn't take a salary for this first 9 months. I mean, we were hustling. It was a very cool origin story. And we're very fortunate. Started with the two of us. We managed about $15 million in assets, which sounds like a lot of money, but when it comes to an investment advisory firm, that ain't a lot of money. But ultimately, over the next 17 years, grew it to 25 people, and we managed about $5.5 billion for individuals and for companies with their 401k and retirement plans as well. And that was my practice. I had a practice that oversaw about $4.5 billion in assets. So many of you are probably run much bigger businesses than I ran, but I want to give you some of the things. I think part of our success was it began. Part of it was related to our business model, but our business model was informed by our faith. And the fact that he and I had met under circumstances where we had alignment with one another spiritually was really, really powerful. And so when we started the firm, we came up with a mission statement. And if you talk to McKinsey or any of the big consulting marketing firms, they probably wouldn't say it was a great mission statement, but it actually laid the foundation and kind of infused the DNA of our organization that really helped us as we built it over the years. And so really where our heart was to serve others and make an impact in their lives. We felt like that was our clients, we felt like that was our employees, we felt like that was the communities in which we lived and worked. And that was really our heart, to serve others. And what we used to call love your neighbor. Think about what Jesus said when he was asked what the greatest commandment was. He says, well, the first is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so when we started our firm, the financial services industry can be fairly conflicted. You can sell products and you can charge fees, and it creates potential conflicts of interest. If I'm meeting you and I'm saying, hey, there are two products, product A, product B. Well, if product B pays me twice as much as product A, then puts me in a position where I'm in conflict. And so the way we structured our firm, which is more common now but was very uncommon back then, was we dropped all of our securities licenses to be able to sell products. All we wanted to do was charge clients directly, charge them a fee, be aligned with them, and that our advice to them as we served them and loved our neighbor, our client, would never be impaired or put us in a position where our interests were ahead of theirs. And in the financial services industry, it's described as having a fiduciary responsibility, which is a legal term, and it means that you have a legal responsibility to do what's in the best interest of your clients before yourself. And at the time when we started our firm, about 0.5% of all financial advisors in the United States actually worked in this kind of framework. And it was really attractive to us. I look back now because being a fiduciary is the highest, has been called the highest duty under the law. And it wasn't that kind of attracted us. It was this desire to love our neighbor that then attracted us to that model. It wasn't that model that then caused us to say, hey, let's love our neighbor, if that makes sense. It was kind of our heart and our spirit that informed and attracted us to that model. So we started the firm, humble beginnings, and there's something that a mentor of mine, a guy named Jim Wise, probably the wisest man I know, he taught us, and he was in our industry, worked for a company called Ron Blue. We weren't exclusively what I would call Christian business. We were a business that was run by two guys who had a very strong faith orientation to Jesus. But Jim had said to us, there's a difference between an ownership mindset and a stewardship mindset. There's a parable that Jesus once talked about. Many of you may have heard, some of you may not, but it's called the parable of the talents, right? So here's the gist of it. There was a rich man. One day, he's called away on business. And so he goes and gathers 3 servants. And he gathers them and he takes his resources, his assets, and he entrusts them to the 3 servants. And it says, each according to their ability. So to one, he gave 5 talents. And talents weren't like talents when we think about gifts. It was a unit of measure. It was like money. And he gave one 5 talents, he gave one 2 talents, he gave one 1 talent, each according to their ability. And he goes away. And their job, they didn't own those talents. They didn't own that money. The man owned it, but he entrusted it to be managed prudently by the 3 men, or the 3 servants that he entrusted it to while he was away. And their job, they weren't owners. Their job was to manage it in a responsible fashion. So he goes away, he comes back. When he comes back, he brings the 3 servants back, and he basically requires them to give a full accounting of what they did with the resources he entrusted them with when he was away. So the first come, and he says, Master, you gave me 5 talents, I turned it into 10, here you go. And he says, well done, good and faithful servant. The second guy says, Master, you gave me 2, here's 4. Basically double his money. Well done, good and faithful servant. Last one says, Master, I knew you were a hard man. You reaped where you did not sow. And so I took your talent and I kept it safe and I'm giving it back to you. And the man says, he calls him a wicked and lazy servant. He said, you could have just taken that 1 talent, put it in the bank and earned interest on it while I was away. So this man who basically, it's not like he lost it. It's not like he's like, oh, well, I took it to Vegas and bad news, the house took it, right? He gave it back to him, but he hadn't managed it responsibly. And he was, that the parable there was, kind of how he failed in that duty. So when we started our firm, we didn't believe, even though technically we were the owners, we always had this mindset that God owned our business and that we were the stewards he entrusted it to. And that ultimately we needed to manage it responsibly, but we didn't own it. And at some point we would give a full accounting. We'd have to give a full accounting to the Lord of how we stewarded this business. Hopefully that makes sense. But that was a very important, just kind of mental alignment with how we saw the business. And so one of the other things we did was we created an org chart when it was 2 of us. And we always tried to think with the beginning. We never thought we were going to be 2 guys sitting in an office. We always thought we were going to build a bigger firm. And so we had this org chart, and there were 20 or 25 different roles on it. And our picture was next to every single one, right? So we were trying to act bigger than we were. And when we would hire somebody, we'd put them on the org chart, we'd take our picture off, we'd put their picture on. And that's kind of how we grew it. That's how we grew it over time. But one of the important things, I know for me, was this concept that I feel like the Lord gave me, this idea of when we think of an org chart within our organizations, what do we have? The leaders are at the top, and then the people who serve them are below, right? And that's kind of the hierarchical way most businesses are run. And I felt like what the Lord said to me was, you need to invert the org chart. That really what your job is to serve your people. That if you serve and care for them, you invert the org chart. Instead of them being below you and serving you, turn that around. Your job is to be at the bottom, and your job is to serve your people. If you serve your people well, they're going to serve your customers and your clients well. They're going to serve your community well. And if they serve your customers and clients well, you're going to have a really good business. And so that mindset of inverting the org chart was something that was really, really important to me. I really viewed all of our people, and we made mistakes, and I made mistakes, and we didn't always get it right, but we did view, and I know that kind of my mindset was that I have 4 kids, kind of like my kids and my family. Like, my job is to care and provide and protect them. And that's how I looked at our staff, that my job, I wanted to create a culture, an environment that met people's needs professionally, met their needs financially, met their needs personally and relationally, met their needs spiritually. As I said, we were not an overt kind of Christian organization. We had people who didn't, have a similar faith orientation that we did within our company. We served clients that, we didn't require clients to be Christians, to be clients of ours. But my mindset was always, how do I care for this group of people? I want to create a wonderful environment and a culture for them where people feel fulfilled, because I know if they feel fulfilled and they feel valued, that then they're going to do a good job for our clients. And so that was kind of our mindset. The other thing that I think we got right was, we had that mission statement at the beginning to serve others and make an impact in their lives. And one of the things we did, again, it was employees, it was clients, it was our community. So we made a commitment early on to give 10% of our profit to the kingdom every year. And at the beginning, it wasn't a whole lot of money, but by the time that I left, we'd given north of $1 million away over kind of the course of history, and our goal was to give $15 million away at some point in time. But that was another important thing for us, is how do we reinvest the resources, again, because we didn't own them. We really viewed our business as really kind of a mechanism by which, as God blessed it, that we could kind of reinvest a portion of what he had given us back in his kingdom. The greatest way I know not to hoard wealth is to give it away. And I think you see a lot of that throughout Scripture, that money's mentioned over 3,000 times, and it was really important for us. And I'll tell you a little bit about. There's an element to that kind of in my story. So one of the other things we did really well is, after a number of years, and John Bissett, who's in here, actually introduced me to the guy who helped us with this, because he helped RVR. We hired a consultant. We were doing a strategic plan for the organization. We hired a consultant, and he actually led us through a process of developing and refining our core purpose and our core values. And he had us read a book called The Advantage by a guy named Patrick Lencioni, who's a well-known business author, has written a number of incredible books. What was interesting, though, is he said that your core purpose and your core values as an organization are not to be aspirational. They're not things you want to accomplish. They actually have to be discovered. They have to be part of your DNA. And the process of developing core purpose and core values is a discovery process. And so what we did is we refined our core purpose and core values, and did a lot of work, and I kind of took a primary role in kind of leading this process, but it really changed the game for us organizationally. So the core purpose we came up with was kind of a variant of the original mission statement. It was to improve lives by helping people make better decisions for themselves and those who depend on them. And so we were in the advice business. And you could apply that. You could apply that to our clients. Maybe it was an individual or spouses or a family, and we wanted to improve their life by helping them make better decisions for themselves and the people who depended on them. Maybe it's their kids, maybe it's their parents, whatever that looks like. In the context of helping a business, a company, we advised retirement plan committees, and those retirement plan committees, they made the decisions about the retirement plan for hundreds or thousands of their employees. If we could give them good advice, that would cascade down to the people who depended on them, their employees. The same could be said for our team, our staff, our employees. As they came in, maybe it's a business issue that they were wrestling with. Maybe it was a personal issue that they came in and they were looking for advice, they were looking for counsel, and we wanted to help them. And then communities. If we were serving on a board of a nonprofit, we were there to help improve the lives of the leadership there and their constituents by giving them good advice for themselves and those who depended on them. So it kind of infused. Core purpose was why we existed. That was the reason we existed, to do that. We also came up with 5 core values, and lots of organizations have core values. A lot of times they're pretty platitudes up on the wall, right? Things like excellence or integrity or charity or whatnot, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the counsel we got, and it was really helpful, was that we needed core values. They only really work if they're embedded in the DNA of the organization. They can't just be, and one of the pieces of advice was, if you really want to know if core values exist in an organization, don't look at what it says on the wall, go ask the people. If one of them is integrity, and you go to the people, and in the cone of silence, you say, do you think the leadership here or the organization has integrity? And they're like, no, these are the biggest bunch of crooks around. Like, you really are only going to know if it's embedded deeply in the organization on a day-to-day basis and part of the DNA and the culture. So we came up with 5 core values, and they were unique. We wanted to make them memorable. Well, the very first one was love your neighbor. That was our primary operating mode. loving your neighbor, putting the interest, whether that was putting clients' interests first, whether that was putting colleagues' interests first. It was love your neighbor. That was core value number one. The second one was what we called own your stuff. We wanted people to take responsibility for their actions. The third was to have a bias towards action. We wanted people that made things happen, right? Didn't just sit around waiting for something to happen, that they were proactive in that. The fourth is what we call master your craft. We wanted people and create an environment where people were constantly developing and improving their skills that would help them professionally, but also would help our organization. And the last one was a little specific to our business. It was called trust the evidence. We wanted to make decisions based on evidence and data, not just on kind of gut feel or instinct. But those 5 core values were incredibly powerful because we worked them into the day-to-day culture of our organization. And there were a couple cool things. I had this idea. We put up this praise wall in the back of our office. So we had kind of the front of the office was super nice, not quite as nice as what Kelly. They had a better business than we had, but we had, it was really pretty like this up front, and then in the back it was it was nice, but it that's where all of us worked, in the back. We wanted the front to be good for our welcoming for our clients. The back was a little bit more muted, but as you walked into the back of our office, I brought in a designer, and they built what I call the praise wall. And so I had our core purpose. You couldn't walk back into our office without seeing the core purpose. And then it had the 5 core values on the left. And I came up with a logo for each core value. And then what I had this designer do is they built it to encourage them. And then they would hang it up on the wall, or value on it, for the month. And so as you would walk by, you would just go and see, oh, this is what so-and-so said about this person, this is what they said. And it was all about building this. One, I wanted the core values to be front and center. I wanted people to be intentional about looking for them and exhibiting them. And I also wanted to build a culture of appreciation and respect and acknowledgement. And what I also had the designer do is they built a little mini version. It was like a little hanger, had our core purpose, had our core values, and it had like a little metal thing. And you could hang the card. So what we would do every month is we'd gather the team, we'd have our team meeting, we'd do a drawing, we'd pull one of the cards out of like a little bucket, and then the person who wrote it would read it to the group and to the person they were giving it to. And it was a way to just kind of infuse this culture of appreciation. And then the person who received it could take it back to their desk, their office, and they could hang it up on this little hanger. And what was cool is this very memorable thing. Maybe you're having a bad day, and you could just look over and you could read through what your colleagues had written about you. And it was a really powerful way to infuse our core purpose and our core values and keep them top of mind. The other thing that did for us, though, is it enabled us to really have intentional conversations as we were coaching and leading our team. And so, if I had somebody who was kind of being selfish, I could sit down and say, okay, number one core value is love your neighbor. Do you think you're loving your neighbor in this, the way you operated here? Like, what do you think? What could you have done to love your neighbor better in this, instead of just thinking about yourself? And so it informed those conversations. Or, if I had somebody who wasn't taking responsibility, hey, that owning your stuff, how can you own your stuff and take responsibility? What's on you in this situation? Don't tell me about, it's kind of like what I do with my kids. Like, don't tell me about what they did. I don't care about what they did. I'll address that. What about what you did? How can you own your stuff in this? Somebody wasn't doing their work. We have a bias towards action. What's keeping you from exhibiting that? And I will just say, we didn't always do it perfectly. I was not the perfect leader at all. But that was very powerful, this idea. I'm very passionate about core purpose, core values in culture. I saw the benefit in our business. And we didn't have a perfect culture. We had our issues. It seemed like towards the end, all my issues were personnel related, right? As you get bigger and you get people. And there were days where I'm like, I know I'm supposed to be loving my neighbor, but like, I just want to bring these people snack because I can't understand why they, and they probably were saying the same thing about me. Over the years though, we built this real culture where people just, we lost people every now and then, but when we would have people leave, I literally would have people that they would cry. They're like, look, there's an opportunity, it's a better opportunity. And when somebody had a better opportunity, my philosophy was, if this is what's right for you and your family, like, you should go pursue that. And not that you need my permission, but I want to release you to go do that. But every person was like, I just love it here so much. I think because we were intentional, and we, as the leaders, my job, my co-founders, like, our job was in part was to be what I called chief reminder of the core purpose and core values. It was our job to continue to remind everybody about these things. And it really served our business well. And I look back at my kind of history there, and I made a lot of mistakes, but I got some things right. But I think my spirit was always to serve our people. And it was just powerful. And so that's kind of a little bit of the story. And ultimately, they've continued to have tremendous success. It's been rooted in, I think, the DNA that we built, that we didn't really even know what we were building early on. It just began to kind of take a life of its own, and we were pretty consistent about not straying from what we believed and why we believed it, not just the what, but the why. Okay, so that's the good part of the story. And for most of my career, my heart and my mind was very much focused on how do I serve our people, care for them. So I tell you, how much time do I have left?
5 minutes.
Okay, all right. I'll see if I can do this in 5 minutes.
Maybe 7.
Okay, so as we had more success, obviously benefited from that, my ego got a little bit inflated, to say the least. And you know, I'm not a person who I don't need. I'm fairly confident in what I do and how I do it. Like, I don't need a lot of accolades and credit from people. But one of my fatal personal flaws is I do have a high need to feel appreciated. I don't need credit, but when I work hard, I want to feel appreciated for it. And as we got bigger, and as you got into COVID, and as we kind of got some more success, and as I started to deal with a bigger organization and some of the challenges, and I started to experience some burnout, a little bit of boredom, but I started to feel taken for granted because I took my eye off the ball. The Lord had for so long kept me focused on being a steward, not an owner, and to loving my neighbor and caring for our people, and thinking more about what was best for them than what was best for me. And something began to shift. Part of it was, I didn't fall away from the faith, but my faith started to get a little bit lukewarm. I started to go through the motions. Nobody would really know it because I can spin a pretty good tale, and I can make it sound like everything's great, you know, and I know all the stuff to say. But the inner work, my time, kind of spiritual disciplines with the Lord, seeking the Lord, I started to rely more on my own wisdom. And I started to drift, not falling away from a belief standpoint, but my faith started to become lukewarm. I wasn't putting in the time. I wasn't seeking the Lord's will in the way that I had for many, many years. And as that happened, you know, we don't wake up one day and feel like we're far away from the Lord. It's these small, almost imperceptible steps on a day-by-day basis that one day you wake up and you're like, well, how the heck did I used to be over there. How the heck did I get here? Why didn't I recognize it? And that happened with me. I started to feel taken for granted. As the organization got better, I started to feel stress and pressure. I didn't handle that all that well. I've been fortunate throughout my life to seek out mentor relationships and accountability and men that could speak into my life, and I gave them permission. You can't hold someone accountable unless they give you permission to do so, and I had given these men permission to do this. And I started to become wise in my own eyes. Figured, like, I know what I'm doing. And so when the men in my life started to speak into my life and I didn't like what they hear, well, guess what I did? I would start to kind of push them away. And so I kind of pushed accountability away. And as that happened, I became more isolated. And then you get into COVID. Well, COVID's all about isolation. And ultimately it led to me leaving the organization. It wasn't salacious, it was totally amicable. I'm still super good friends with all the people there, but I felt like the Lord took it away from me because I had stopped being a good steward of what He entrusted me with. I had been like that servant who just kind of, you know, buried the talent in the ground. And I decided to leave the firm. I was bored, I was burned out. I wanted to do some new things. I wanted to push our organization in a way, and we had added more partners and a management team, and the dynamics of that, you know, just was wearing me out. I wanted us to do some new things. I couldn't get my partners on board to do it. And finally I said, I am done. I walked away. I wanted to go start a fintech, a technology company for my industry. Made that decision. I told my partners in late 2020, I am out. We went through a buyout, worked out the buyout. Was very fortunate through that whole process. I get into January, February of 2021. After we've made the decision, we've communicated with clients, we've communicated with staff, I started to freak out and panic. Like, what the heck was I thinking? What am I doing? And I'd never dealt with anxiety and depression, and I started to deal with this massive amount of fear and regret and anxiety and depression. Have I destroyed my family's future with what I've decided to do? And we get into early March, and I can't sleep. And so I went 3.5 weeks where I didn't get more than 90 minutes of sleep in a 24-hour period. The reason they torture terrorists with sleep deprivation is because you can totally control somebody. And I went off the rails. Deep, dark anxiety, depression. I went through a 3-day period where I had a panic attack 3 days in a row for 8 hours straight. And my wife, God bless her soul, because she was a rock for us, she's like, you have got to get help, Josh. So fortunately, I had an incredible group of guys. Two of the guys that are in our CEO group, one of the guys that's here. I had an incredible group of guys who came around me. My wife was incredible. I had some doctors. I checked myself into the psychiatric ward at St. Joe's for 5 days. They took my shoes, they took my shoelaces, they took my belt. Everybody's on suicide watch, except for me. I never got to that point. I'm literally in the psychiatric ward. For 5 straight days, I can't see my family. I can use the phone for 30 minutes a day. I got to go to arts and crafts every day because I had to go to an arts and crafts little session with them. I mean, it was like, it was crazy. It was crazy. They got me medicated. I started to get a little bit of sleep. 5 days later, I come out. I go on medication for an extended period of time to kind of help me deal with all of this. Had an incredible group of 4 guys who came along that loved me. There's a story in the Bible. There's a paralytic, and Jesus is teaching in a home, and everybody in the town is in there, and the paralytic wants to be healed, but he can't get in to see Jesus because it's so crowded. And so his 4 friends come along, and they pick him up on his mat that he sat on, and they climb up onto the roof of this house. And this thatched roof back then, they dig a hole in it, and they lower the man down. And Jesus takes pity on the man, and he heals him. And he says, my friend, the faith of your friends has made you well. It was the faith of those 4 friends that helped this man, his life be changed. And John Bissett's one of those guys. Mike Donahue's another guy. A guy named Tom Carroll is another. These men that came along and loved me. And literally, I was like the emotional paralytic. And they and my wife literally kind of healed me and helped me go through this. I do believe I was so stressed, and even it was a process. From March through the end of July of 2021 was the hardest time of my life. Like, it's not like I came out of the hospital and next thing you know, I'm like, okay, I'm good, let's go. Like, I dealt with some really deep, dark times, and I would walk 5 to 10 miles a day because that's the only thing that would like de-stress me. And every time I would walk, I would just kind of pour my heart out to the Lord. Lord, why? Like, why did you take Greenspring away from me? Like, and the Lord, he was firm but loving to me. He showed me a lot of my own failures. I was blind to it at first, but he started to reveal to me, Josh, let's talk about some of these ways, and let's talk about how you drifted and your mindset changed. Anyways, long story short, for months, I asked the same question over, Lord, why did you take Greenspring away from me? And I didn't hear a word. Felt like I got no direction from him. And then one day, and it was kind of the worst day in that 5 or 6 month period, I'm out walking, I'm crying, and I asked that question, Lord, why did you take Greenspring away from me? And you may not believe this, but I feel like I audibly heard the Lord say to me, Josh, I didn't take Greenspring away from you. I took it away for you. Took it away for you. And it's like this veil lifted after that. And that was I kind of hit bottom, but hearing that and realizing that the Lord gave me this gift to steward, and I did a good job for a long time. But part of my failings led to, He didn't take it away from me, He took it away for me, because He wanted to reorient my life to kind of get me back to where I was, and to what had served me and my family and our people so well. And the dark times that I went through, I don't feel like looking back now was a punishment. And yet He took away something that was great, and I don't really have regret. I have a little bit of remorse. There are things I wish I would have done probably differently. But now there's this kind of redemption story. I have this new company that I started. Number one core value, it's kind of like love your neighbor. It's just people with priorities. So right, I've kind of gone back to kind of my roots there. And I've never had more fun in my career. The Lord, I'm not having the success that I had had previously, but I see a pathway there. The Lord has been very gracious in the midst of it. And my story's not over. It's really important. I tell my kids it's important in life to start well, but it's more important to finish well. And sometimes there's steps forward you take and steps back. And a lot of times, what can come out of the ashes of failure is, great opportunity, and I think great success. And I have no idea where the Lord is taking me on this journey. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't need to have it look like it was before, but I'm so thankful that, in the Bible it says that what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And I'm so thankful that the Lord took away what He had given me when it had run its course, and I wasn't in a position to lead it in the same way that I needed to, and that He took it away. And I'm even more grateful that He took it away. He took me through a dark time. Being in the hospital I thought was going to be the low light of my life. I gotta say, it's probably going to be the highlight of my life. And it's hard to say, it's easy to say that now. In the moment, it was like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. Anyways, that's kind of my story. And here's what I would say is there's another in the Bible, you've heard it, the Genesis story. There's a story of Adam and Eve, right? God says, look, you can eat from any tree in the garden except that one tree. When one of my kids was young, I'll never forget, we were walking, and there was a railing that had been painted, and there was a wet paint sign up. And so we're walking, and what do you know? Like my 6-year-old walks over, and he puts his hand on the railing, and he gets paint all over. And I'm like, what are you doing? Did you read the sign? And he said, yeah. I said, what does it say? He said it said wet paint. And I was like, then why did you touch the railing? And he says, well, I just wanted to see if it was actually wet. So, Adam and Eve, they eat from the one tree, the apple. We have the fall. We have, sin enters the world. And it says that they saw each other's nakedness and they were ashamed. Something changed, right, in the whole kind of dynamic of their relationship with one another and their relationship with God. And it says that God was walking in the cool of the afternoon. And He says, Adam, where are you? And Adam and Eve were ashamed and they were hiding. And I always thought, that's a really interesting question. And God is omnipotent, right? He's all powerful. He's omniscient. He's all knowing. He's omnipresent. He's everywhere at once. I do believe that. And he's all knowing. And I was like, well, why would He, how did He not know where Adam was? Then I realized, when God said, Adam, where are you? It wasn't that God didn't know where he was. It was Adam who didn't know where he was. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say is, as part of this story, is that, a lot of times we want to hide from God. That's not a great strategy. And so kind of my encouragement today is, and hopefully you take something, like I said, most of you are probably much more successful than I am, but some of these lessons around the stewardship versus ownership mindset, about putting the interests, not just of your customers, but of your people first. If you serve your people well, they're going to care for your business well. I think the idea of that, things that are taken away from us, and sometimes when we have failure, when we fall short, it's not things that are taken away from us necessarily. Maybe it's things that are taken away for us. And the last one would be that this life is not meant to be walked alone. The power of community and people, and having people who you're willing to let them hold you accountable, that you're willing to be vulnerable with them, that you're willing to entrust your care to them is so incredibly powerful. And not hiding from them and accountability, not hiding from the Lord as He desires to have, relationship with us. That would be, my encouragement. I'm so grateful for the good things I've experienced. I'm even more grateful for some of the failures and challenges and what the Lord He's kind of recentered my own walk. I have no idea. I don't try to think that much about the future anymore, but just day by day, how can I experience the Lord's presence? How can I be faithful as best as I can in the things He's called me to, in the times when I fall short, to ask for forgiveness, and to not let it bog me down and put me into a kind of a dark pit. And I hope there's some lessons for you. The Lord desires relationship with us. There's nothing like feeling loved by the Creator of the universe. And it's also just important to have loving relationship from people in our lives, and not just to feel loved, but also to give love. And if any of you, what I realized is mental health. I never struggled with that. I would hear about things and be like, yeah, people just need to suck it up. Having been through it now, I have a much different perspective on it. If you're struggling with anything, if you ever want to talk, happy to be transparent. I don't have all the answers. I'd encourage you, find somebody. I'm so thankful that I didn't try to get through all of it on my own. And if I can ever do anything for any one of you guys and gal, if feel free to reach out. This is part of my story now. Sorry I'm going long, but I'm transparent about this stuff. I'm not ashamed of it. In some ways, I'm thankful for it, and it's part of my kind of personal ministry now. And anyways, I appreciate you listening to my long suffering story. Hopefully you got a little something through it. And thank you to CBMC. Really excited, enjoy being part of the CEO group under the leadership of Mark Thayer and CBMC. And thank you guys so much. Sorry I went long. No. Mark was starting to play the music, but I didn't listen to him.
Well, we really appreciate you being so transparent, pouring your heart out. If you can imagine, it's tough to do in front of a group of people that you may not even know or have a relationship with. A couple things that Josh said as a quick wrap up, because I want to do a closing prayer. But a couple things stood out to me, and you talked about Jesus mentioning, well, what are the, somebody came up to Jesus and said, all right, 10 commandments, that's kind of a lot, can't really do all those. Could you boil it down to one? What's the most important one? And Jesus said, number one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your spirit. And the second one, which is like that, what Jesus said, is love your neighbor as yourself. Loving your neighbor as yourself is kind of a popular thing, that's still okay today. Loving God with every inch and every part of your body is tough. How do you do that? And one way you do that is just totally surrender your life to God. Well, what does loving God mean? Well, he wrote a book. Maybe we ought to pull out the book he wrote. It's a bestseller. Josh is the best-selling author, but God wrote this book that's been the bestseller of all time. It's called the Bible. So challenge you to get into the Word. And another thing that Josh said maybe got him off center was taking your eye off the ball. So I think about Jesus also said, seek first His kingdom, and then all these things will be added to you. How do you do that? Step one, I think, is to surrender your life to Christ. And if you have not done that, or if you've taken your eye off the ball, I just invite you, as a closing prayer, just to pray silently along with me as I close our time of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I know there are times that I have taken my eye off the ball. Lord, God calls that missing the mark, which is sin. Lord, we all fall short. We all fall short of the glory of God. We all sin. So, Lord, I just ask you that you would forgive me my sins, Lord. I just surrender my life today to you. Lord, just take it, guide it, show me how to follow you. Lord, come into my heart, and I just seek to have a personal relationship with you. And we just ask these things in Jesus' name. As far as a little closing, we like to have a record of your attendance. There's a card in front of everyone. Before you start filling out the information like your name and your address, there's the first box over to the right. So I prayed to receive Christ for the very first time. If you prayed along with me, prayed along with Josh, and surrendered your life to Christ today, please let us know. Like Josh says, it's horrible to be alone, and you don't have to be alone. And that's one of the things that CBMC offers, is a team of guys to come alongside you and love you. You might have taken your eye off the ball, for a moment or for many years. If you recommitted your life to Christ today, just let us know that, and we'll continue to pray for you. If you just want to know a little bit more about this organization and how it can help you, there's an opportunity to mark that box. And then there's some other things that you might be interested in. This event today is kind of a combination of 4 or 5 teams around the Baltimore Metro North area. So the many comments and conversations about the CEO team that meets right here. We have several of those other CEO teams. So you may be a business owner, and you might want to see Mark Thayer, who kind of heads up our peer advisory teams, and ask him, do you have a group that could help me? I'm a business owner. If you're not a business owner, we actually have even more groups that you could plug into. We have a group right here in this area that meets on Wednesday mornings at, I believe, 6:45, 6:30, and Brett Daniels is here. He leads that. If you kind of wave your hand, you've got several members of that group. There's another group that meets in Timonium on Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. Then we have yet another Hunt Valley group that meets on Friday mornings. And we have a group for young professionals. So really, there's no excuse. There's a group for everybody in this room, and we would encourage you to think about if you're going through a trial similar to Josh's, or very different from Josh's, who would you talk to? Do you have a group of guys who would come around and love you and walk with you and help you get your eye back on the ball? You might be a guy who's never really gotten into the Word of God. We have been around this room that would sit down one-on-one, no stupid questions, no embarrassment if you don't know what you're doing, where to start reading the Bible, and they'll just meet with you over coffee and walk with you and help you get into God's Word. So I don't want to take any more time. If we had a couple minutes, we were going to do some open Q&A, but I think we're out of the, what time is it? Yeah, we're a few minutes late. We're all business guys, and we have a schedule. So we committed to end our official or our formal program at 8:30. So you all are dismissed. However, Josh is here. Most of our guys will be here, at least for another 30 minutes. So if you have a question for Josh, he'll be here. He'll be glad to talk with you, answer that question. I'll speak for you. I think you said you were available, that if you don't have time today, you can follow up another time. Any of our CBMC leaders are available to talk to you either this morning, and even more importantly, Vicki brought an awful lot of food and welcome you to kind of stay around, have a bite to eat, do some more fellowship, do some more networking, and thank you so much for coming out, supporting the mission and vision of CBMC, and you guys have a great weekend. So we're dismissed. Help us eat that food.